Last week we had the introduction of course, the new Apple 14 series. And there was a lot to say about, of course, that introduction. But the big thing I want to discuss is the dynamic island. That for some reason, people seem to praise. And I don't want it on my Android phone, even though there's a lot of praise about it. That seems like a horrible implementation on how to interact with your phone. So, let's discuss on why I think that. Now, to begin with, phones have been increasing for a while now when it comes to the size itself. Basically starting out with, of course, the first Note from Samsung, and then we just saw more and more larger phones, because simply put, this is where we play most of our content on. We use this most of the time to watch, of course, our TikToks, YouTube, and so on. This is something that you have with you all the time, and something that you watch a lot of media on. But with that comes also the impossibility to reach the top of the phone very practically. If you want to reach the top of the phone, you need to be creative in terms of shifting, in the way that you hold your arm and whatnot. And well, Apple said, you know what? Let's make sure people have to use it with the dynamic island. The dynamic island in terms of implementation looks cool and whatnot, and it feels like, of course, the cutout then somewhat has a use, which I still don't agree with. But when it comes to that, yeah, the design implementation is horrible, and I don't want to see it on any other phone. For the love of God, if Android devices are getting this, make sure that this is not something that is a must. I do not want to answer my calls on the top of the screen. I do not want to have my control of music on the top of the screen. I don't want it. I want my usage to be below the middle of the screen itself. This is how Android has been running for a very long time, and how we use our phone. For instance, normally, of course, if you want to reach your settings, you can either go to the top, but you can also just slide down from the center itself, allowing you to use this part of your display to interact, where this is the viewing area. It works perfectly fine, and it should be like that, because simply put, now let me get closer for that one, it's easy to use. That's important. But for some reason, when it comes to the dynamic island, people are praising that like there's no tomorrow. Well, the reality is that it's very uncomfortable to use if you want to use your phone normally with one hand. Two-handed use is a must when it comes to having a dynamic island or holding your phone really awkwardly with no support of course, your pink itself, which is how most people use their phone. And another thing, I know a lot of people will say, well, you know, Chinese and all the other OEMs will copy what Apple actually has done here. Actually, what if I told you that this was already a thing? The Honor V20, for instance, already had a feature like this. Of course, it does have that cutout on the left side, but the Honor V20 already had an implementation where it used an animation on the top, close to, of course, your camera cutout, to have this dynamic island kind of effect. So if others are copying it when it comes to Android, technically it's a copy from that instead of a copy from Apple. But again, I don't want it. Many people don't want it, so don't give it to us. The whole thing about the dynamic island is overrated, and I feel like it's just a terrible implementation in terms of software. It's designed by someone who doesn't understand the usability of the screen itself, where you are normally with your hand itself. That's below that middle area, not on top. Okay, so enough about the dynamic island. I have another rant. Why is there an iPhone 14? I know there's a slight increase in terms of camera. I know there is a slight increase in CPU, because now it uses the CPU of course, the iPhone 13 Pro instead of using the iPhone 13 CPU. But honestly, the iPhone 14 as well doesn't make any sense. If you want to have, of course, the experience of an Apple, I would without a doubt advise using the iPhone 13 instead of the iPhone 14. You pay less, you get a SIM tray, and we're gonna get to that. You get a SIM tray, and of course you're gonna have the experience pretty similar to, of course, the iPhone 14. Just some slight differences. Yes, normally from year to year you don't have a lot of differences, but this is pretty much an iPhone 13 with a slight increase. with a slight increase. Okay, so I said it. We're gonna get to the SIM card itself and why I am worried about the implementation itself. With the iPhone 14 in the US only, and of course they made sure that you then have a certain 5mm band only for that version because, duh, they want to make sure that they say, for instance, there isn't any space and therefore, you know, we had to remove it on the same version. Anyway, when it comes to that, I can easily see that because of Apple doing this now, that we will see implementations similar with other brands. This is something we've seen from every single device. For instance, Apple removed the headphone jack. Everyone made fun of it and then followed suit. Apple removed the charger. Everyone made fun of it and then did the same. Apple removed the SIM card tray and everyone will probably follow suit in that as well. And also, I wouldn't be very surprised if we actually either get a version in the US where you have no charging port at all anymore and maybe just MagSafe, which is a terrible plan by the way, because simply put, wireless charging is far less efficient. Even if it can charge at a certain rate, it's far less efficient than wired charging. Simple fact. Really, it is. Simple fact. There's no denying that. That's just how reality is. Wireless charging isn't anywhere near as good as, of course, wired charging. Just like wired audio is better than wireless audio. Either way, when it comes to that, I can easily see that Apple will actually remove it for the US version in some years and then actually have a USB-C version for the EU. But then later maybe potentially have that same implementation there as well. Anyway, what Apple is doing always has set a precedent. Always has made changes to what kind of phone you're getting, what kind of experience you are getting, what is going to be removed or what is going to be added. Now, of course, a lot of things are also copies from Apple. Apple doesn't only do what they want, they also follow what others do, but it isn't on the same level as we see with other brands. Like for instance, having of course an always on display. This is something that we had since 2010. Welcome, by the way, to 2010 Apple with that. Anyway, when it comes to that, yeah, Apple has always set a certain precedent. Don't agree with it, but it is reality. When it comes to mobile phones, that simply is reality. I hate it, but it is reality. Either way, what do you think about the removal of the SIM slot? What do you think about the dynamic stupid island? And what do you, of course, think about the iPhone 14? Does it make even any sense at all? Let me know in the comments below. And what do you think about this rant? Because simply put, this is more a video about me ranting and worried about the future potentials of Android devices having some implementation that follows Apple. Because for the love of God, they have done that so many times where it is questionable if they even should. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and of course, talk to you guys in the next.